Welcome to the Big O Show on the Overreaction Sports Network, powered by Believe.
Still the same damn kid from Oklahoma, same old dreams hanging off of my shoulders, just wishing and waiting on a shooting star for all to see.
And now your host, straight out of Oklahoma, former Buffalo Bill, Jerry Ostroski.
I'm still the same damn kid from Oklahoma.
What is going on? Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Big O Show here on the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network. We are powered by Believe. Thanks for joining us today as we are in the middle of an off season here in Orchard Park. And obviously, OTAs continue, Phase 3 continues, and we will get to mandatory minicamp next week. But we're going to get into a little bit of Joe Brady and Bobby Babich Jr., BBJ. We're at the podium this week talking about the team, talking about situations. And one of the things that I feel that we should get into here before we get into those interviews is obviously the status of James Cook and will he report next week to OTAs. But again, this is the Big O Show. We're here on usually Wednesday nights, this week Thursday, 8 Eastern, 7 Central. And as always, folks, we'd appreciate it if you could hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. It helps us out. Review the show, tell your friends. And as we climb higher and higher in this thing, and, we appreciate you watching and listening. And we love bringing you the best in Buffalo Bills content here on the nets. But as I said before we, get into Bobby Babich Jr. and Joe Brady and some of the things they had to say at One Bills Drive, big question mark next week. Does James Cook report? And obviously next week things are a little bit different. This is a situation where this is mandatory. So if James Cook is not at minicamp, he is subject to a fine from the Buffalo Bills. Joe Brady spoke about James Cook, whether, his being or his absence from OTAs thus far. He says, hey, we love Jimbo, but we coach who's here. And I wouldn't expect anything different out of offense coordinator Joe Brady. He said this gives others at the running back position. Obviously, we know Davis, we know Johnson, Gore Jr. and the likes. It gives them an opportunity to get reps and do some things that maybe they wouldn't normally have the opportunity to do if James Cook was present at OTAs. My opinion on this, I believe James Cook will be there next week because of two things. This is a twofold deal. First is this: no man wants to give back his money. And this isn't a situation where James Cook doesn't have a contract. James Cook has a contract. He's locked up for another year. He's trying to get another deal, but he is locked up for another year. So as we've spoken about many, many times on this show and on other shows on the Overreaction Buffalo Network, the Buffalo Bills hold all the bargaining chips. This is a situation where Brandon Beane and the likes, they have the advantage in negotiations because he's under contract. So James Cook doesn't have much power other than to not show up or voice his displeasure, or as he's done, voice what he wants as far as a contract goes. But I think he'll be there, and that's two reasons. One is this: he doesn't want to pay the fines. Second is this: this is a perfect opportunity for him to have an out for not being at OTAs. That out is this: OTAs are not mandatory. No player is obligated to be at OTAs. So he can come in. If he's at the press conference, if they make him available to the media and he's asked, where have you been? Why haven't you been here? He can simply say, I didn't have to be here. I was in Florida. I was wherever. I was working on my health, working on my body, working on my skills. I was working hard. And if he does show up for mandatory OTAs next week, or mandatory minicamp, it will be interesting to see what sort of shape he's in. I would expect him to be in tip-top shape. I think he's been working. I think he's been doing those things. It'll be shocking to me anyway if he shows up and he's not ready to go. But coming to the mandatory minicamp gives him the perfect opportunity and the excuse to say, I did not have to be here for OTAs. Now that I have to be here, it's mandatory, I'm here. So we'll see how that goes. It's something to look into next week. I'm sure we'll talk about it, report on it quite a bit here on the Overreaction Network, and that is whether James Cook, Jimbo, shows up to the mandatory minicamp. Me personally, I think he'll be there. Joe Brady, both coordinators this week were made available to the media. We'll talk a little bit about Joe Brady and some of the things that he talked about first as we roll along on this Big O show. We won't be here too long today as it is the offseason. But Joe Brady, some of the things he discussed. And one of the things I liked about these interviews and made me feel maybe a little bit at ease and talked a little bit about it Sunday on the Overreaction show with the fellows, with Joe and John, all the areas of maybe that were in flux, all the areas that we kind of were worried about, both coordinators talked about at length and kind of put everybody's mind at ease. One of those areas being Dalton Kincaid. Obviously, Dalton Kincaid coming off the injuries and all the things he had going on last year. We heard about the strange kind of lesion that he was dealing with, things like that. Obviously, the PCL. Maybe we weren't privy to the fact that he was banged up much more than we realized. But Joe Brady went into Dalton Kincaid, his preparation for the upcoming season, said that Dalton Kincaid has been at One Bills Drive since the season was over. He's seen him almost every day in the weight room. He's been putting in the time. He looks himself, and he looks confident. So that was something that was good to hear from Joe Brady, as obviously Dalton Kincaid is a huge part of this offense. And we broke some things down with Dalton Kincaid and his relationship with Josh Allen. The healthier he is, the more confident he is. Him and Josh can continue to work on that relationship in the passing game and those types of things so that they can be, much more comfortable where Josh is comfortable, where Dalton Kincaid will be in certain routes, and Dalton Kincaid's comfortable where the ball will be in certain routes. So it was good to hear about Dalton Kincaid, his progress. Haven't heard much else out of minicamp, or I should say OTAs, about him. Obviously, he's progressing and moving in the right direction. Josh Palmer was another person that was talked about. And one of the things that Joe Brady talked about with Josh Palmer is he was a big fan of his since he came out of college. Joe Brady likes his skill set, said he's fit in pretty much seamlessly into the offense. I would expect nothing different. This was one of my favorite signings of the offseason, was the Palmer signing. I thought that he fits very, very well with what the Bills want to do. His style of route running, the way he can run multiple routes. The other thing that Joe Brady talks about, and he talked about this with the wide receiver room in general, is that Josh Palmer plays all the spots. If you look at his snap counts from last season in San Diego, I believe he had over 100 snaps in the slot as well. So he doesn't play just outside. He can play inside as well. And Joe Brady made it a point to say, our wide receivers shouldn't have specific spots. I want them to be able to play across the board, inside and out. I think you see that with Keon Coleman. I think Keon Coleman could be a dog inside. Obviously, he's playing outside right now, but I think he can play some inside. I think Khalil Shakir in a pinch can play outside. Obviously, Josh Palmer has that versatility. Now you have Elijah Moore, who has been fitting in really, really well by all reports. And Joe Brady talked a little bit about him as well, the former second-round pick of the New York Jets. And then last couple of years with the Browns, we get him from the Browns. But he's another guy that can play inside and out. So a lot going on at the wide receiver position. And obviously, emphasis of this offseason, Brady's presser, probably not quite as dramatic, a little bit less involved, because we know that the offense in Buffalo is set. And I do want to talk about something at the end of this that I think is pretty interesting. We talked about it today on the Bill Squad show with Joe Marino and Jeremy White about really, what does everybody eat really mean? What does this concept of everybody eats really mean? We'll talk about that in a second. He did get into Josh Allen. As far as Josh Allen and some of the things that he's working on this offseason, and, what is his focal point? What is his focus point? And obviously last season it was mental game, and it's always mental game. I think you can never be too sharp, or you can never be too worked up. When I say worked up, I mean too studied up on the mental aspect of football, especially at the quarterback position. One of the things he said that Josh Allen's really working on this year, his eyes are what's going on, what his eyes see, trusting his eyes, whether that's coverages as he's dropping back, whether that's manipulating safeties in a route, those types of things. We all know that Josh is not a on-time quarterback. He's not a guy that's going to drop back, set his back foot, and fire it into small windows. Josh likes to see things. He anticipates throws. He likes to see separation, those types of things out of his wide receivers. He's more of a see and react guy. So continuing to work on that eye, the eye schematics and how he sees things in the passing game is a big deal to him. And that's something that he is continuing to work on this offseason. But let's get in real quick to this everybody eats. And we talked about it today at length on the show. And if you haven't checked out Bill Squad, we do that on Mondays and Thursdays at noon Eastern time with, like I said, Joe Marino, Jeremy White. And Joe Brady in this press conference kind of had his version of what everybody eats is. And it was much more of a, dare I say, kumbaya type answer than it was, we're trying to force the ball all across the field. And I really think that everybody eats is kind of almost a marketing slogan. And everybody eats, to me anyway, is the fact that nobody has really moved to the front of this group. There is no guy that comes in and demands the ball 50% of the time. There is no guy that is going to get the majority of the targets. I don't believe it's that they go in and they say, okay, we've thrown the ball to Josh Palmer 10 times. We got to make sure we give it to Shakir 10 times. I don't think that's the concept. I think it's much more along the lines of if you've ever heard the saying, you eat what you kill. And as these guys work on this in this offense, they work on their route concepts, they work on their route trees and route running and all those different things. They're going to earn their opportunities by how they play on the field. And it'll be interesting to see is it a Josh Palmer? Is it Elijah Moore? We all know Shakir is probably the most valued receiver on that team. I still believe that, especially in third down. He is Josh's go-to guy. So we know that he's established himself as that solid guy in third down, that solid guy when he needs a catch. He trusts Shakir, he's going to give him the ball. But as these other guys, if they start moving to the forefront, you're going to see him get more passes thrown to him. Is that because they've gone in and they've just really broken it down and we're going to throw the ball here and there more? No, I think it's the everybody eats mantra comes from everybody's in this offense at the wide receiver spot. And if you want to throw the tight ends in there, please do. It is much more on the equal. And as they move forward, they'll get their opportunities. So, I thought it was interesting what Joe Brady had to say about everybody eats, and it's all fine and dandy, but obviously I think it's much more of a slogan than anything. And then also too, you got to look at it this way: in the world of salary cap football, everybody eats means you're not paying one or two guys a whole ton of money. Everybody's making kind of around the same amount of money, and obviously Buffalo not going crazy in the wide receiver room as far as what they're paying people and what they're not paying people. So Joe Brady had some things to say, all good stuff. And like I said, wouldn't expect much out of the offensive side. We all know that the offensive side of the ball is pretty much cut and dry. And really the biggest story is, like we talked about right off the bat, does James Cook show up next week for mandatory minicamp? I think he will be there. I do think he will be there. If he's not, we'll have a lot to talk about, folks. There's no doubt about it. But as always, this is the Big O Show on the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network. We're powered by Believe. We'd really appreciate it if you could help us out. Hit the subscribe, hit the like. I know there's a lot of people out there that watch the show that aren't subscribed. If you could hit subscribe, it would help us out as we move forward with this Bills content that we bring you every week. But Bobby Babich Jr., BBJ, also had the opportunity to speak at the podium this week. And some of the things he touched on that I thought were interesting. The main thing is this. Right off the bat, he was asked about the defensive line position. And when asked about D-line, he was asked predominantly about the coaching situation. We all know that Ryan Nielsen, senior defensive analyst or senior defensive assistant, has pretty much taken over. If you watch the videos, he has taken over the D-line group, while Marcus West is still listed as the D-line coach, and Jason Rebrovich is still the assistant D-line coach. He was brought in this year as well. Nielsen is running that group. So then you start thinking, 3 coaches at the defensive line spot. Does that seem excessive? BBJ went in to further explain that, and he said as he's been at Buffalo, and at first, he's worked his way up, kind of a senior analyst. He was kind of an analyst spot. Then he was an assistant coach at a position before he took over, DBs. He's coached DBs in this defense. He's also coached linebackers. But if you look at Babich and what he had to say, this whole situation coaching-wise mirrors what they've done in the secondary forever. The secondary has had 3 coaches for quite some time, doesn't see the issue of having 3 coaches up front. If you look at this Buffalo Bills defense and how things are lined up, and you look at the D-line spot, tons of new faces, right? We've got Joey Bosa, going to be 30 soon, longtime veteran, knows how to play, obviously needs to learn the little intricacies of the 4-2-5, all right? There's a lot of other guys that have come in, our rookies that have come in. TJ Sanders, those guys. You got Walker. Then you got the guys like Michael Hoyt, and you got Ogunjobi, free agent signings that have come in. Obviously, they'll be gone for the first 4 weeks or the first 6 weeks because of the PED suspensions. But you got a ton of new faces at that position. The other thing is this: as much emphasis as we put on the defensive secondary in the 4-2-5, the defensive line, the 4 guys that are on the field, probably have the biggest emphasis as far as their play making this style of defense go. You have to have production out of those 4 dudes. And while defensive back play, corner play, safety play, coverage play correlates to D-line, and pass rush and pressures and quarterback hits correlate to coverage, it is known that the defensive line is what makes this 4-2-5 go. You only got 4 guys inside, and they got to do a lot of things. That's why you got big physical defensive ends to play compression-style defensive end when they're pass rushing, because those guys also have to play the run very well. You need inside guys and create havoc. That's why you got guys like Ed Oliver. You draft a guy like TJ Sanders. You got dudes like that can get slash and get upfield. Michael Hoyt, I thought the conversation about him from Bobby Babich Jr. was incredibly interesting. Said he's a guy that he's looked at for quite some time. He's loved his skill set. It's unique. And he's been thinking about, how do I get this guy to fit into what we're doing? So when Hoyt does come back, I would expect a lot of different things out of him. Not just playing straight up defensive end and his ability to rush the passer. You got to look at him dropping back into a linebacker position to where he can give us size and give us an extra backer and get us in a 4-3 set where we've got 4 down linemen. Now Hoyt's playing that extra backer to give us 3 guys, because we all know that those backers are not very big. Even though we've got Bernard and Milano back together again, and we haven't seen this crew play a lot of meaningful football together in quite some time. They've played pieces, but because of injury, they haven't been together for a while. Be nice to see those 2 healthy all season and what they can do. But Hoyt brings you some different things. I wouldn't doubt if you see Michael Hoyt drop back into coverage, playing curl flat, and those types of things. So Babich did make that point to talk about Michael Hoyt and just the unique skill set he brings to the Bills defense. Another added element to that defensive line. So if you look at the fact that you got Nelson, West, and Rebrovich, it shouldn't shock anybody. 3 defensive line coaches for this group, I think, is a smart thing. I think it's a good thing, along with the other voices that have been brought in, because when you look at the Bills' defense, even though you got a new defense coordinator, he's a disciple of the head coach who used to be the D coordinator, Sean McDermott. Babich has learned under McDermott. Leslie Frazier came in, maybe not quite that McDermott tree, but played kind of a bend don't break style. When McDermott was the D coordinator, it was a lot of blitzing and just over aggression. Babich is kind of giving you a little bit of both. So when these new coaches come in this year on the defensive side, you got new voices, new ideas. I think it's very, very relevant and something to talk about. Interesting that Bobby Babich Jr. spoke on it while he was at the podium. Some other things Babich talked about. Second cornerback. We have all basically said Hairston is the starter across the line from Benford. Not true. Said that second corner is wide open. They'll all get opportunities for the spot, and we'll see what happens when camp is over. Obviously, Trey White rolled out as the first guy to take reps at that spot when the third phase of OTA started. Experience in the defense, respect out of your coaches, but I think we all know that Hairston needs to be that guy. And if you listen to Trey White talk about Hairston and the things that he brings to that position, which I thought was really interesting, I thought was really cool by Trey to give Hairston, for lack of better terms, so much love that he did. And as far as his skill set goes, it's quite obvious that Hairston is a guy that, everybody wants to see play to his ability, and that Trey White kind of maybe has a role as a mentor for him, which is good to know. So second wide receiver spot or second cornerback spot is wide open. And to be honest with you, BBJ said all positions are wide open. And it is the first time in a while, and I've said this before on the show, it's bothered me a little bit in the past. Before we even got to St. John Fisher, we could write a lot of these names down in ink and basically say, hey, these are our starters. There is no comp. Now it's not so much the case. There's a lot of competition up in the defensive line. There's a lot of competition in the secondary. Now, maybe not so as far as linebackers go. Now, one of the things that could be interesting is the Dorian Williams situation with the redone Milano contract. Can Dorian Williams push Milano for playing time and or a starting role? So there's your battle there. Another battle we'll have is Cam Lewis and Jordan Hancock, which I thought was interesting that Babich made it a point to talk about Jordan Hancock. He said this: they have a specific plan for his development. They're following that plan to a T, and they're progressing along those lines. I'd love to know what that plan is. I'd have to think that plan probably has to do with being a nickel corner and a safety. And let's not forget Dorian Strong in the mix as well. But to single out Hancock and say they have a specific plan for his development means that they obviously picked him at that spot for a reason. They wanted him in this defense, and they're going to do a lot to get him ready to play. So hopefully we'll learn more about this quote-unquote specific plan as things roll along and the offseason rolls along. But Babich is kind of, to finish this whole thing off, talked a little bit about failure and failure being the best teacher and all those different things. So lots out of One Bills Drive from both coordinators. And like I said, not much out of the offense, a lot out of the defense. Also, Babich spoke on the safety room. I want to touch on that real quick before we get out of here on this Thursday edition of the Big O Show. But he talked about Rapp. Rapp had a great year. I agree with that. I thought Rapp had a great season. I think Rapp's a great player. I love his style of play. I love physical headhunter type safeties. He's got to keep himself on the field a little more. Too many injuries. Did say Damar Hamlin had his best season as a pro. Probably would agree with that. But is his best season as a pro good enough? We'll find out as the camp goes along. And then the one thing, and we talked earlier about how I felt that all areas of maybe concern were spoken about in a good sense or a good light. That third area being Cole Bishop. So he's made a huge jump in the understanding of the defensive scheme. He's much more reactionary now instead of thinking about everything, and his development is right in line with where they want him. So it's good to hear that about Cole Bishop as well. So lots of good things out of Joe Brady and Bobby Babich Jr. From One Bills Drive this week is OTA Phase 3 continues. And we get to mandatory minicamp next week, which I'm sure we'll talk about here on the network quite a bit. And the number one huge question that we will have answered pretty quickly, and that's, is James Cook a part of the mandatory minicamp? We'll see what happens. I believe he'll be there. I gave you my reasons why. So once again, I'm the Big O Jerry Ostroski. This is the Big O Show, a show about the Buffalo Bills, hosted by a former Buffalo Bill here on the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network. We are powered by Believe. You can catch us on YouTube as always. Once we do the live show, those recordings are always on YouTube if you prefer to watch the video. If you're on the run, if you're on the go, you're exercising at the gym, you're driving to work, or you're just hanging out at the house and you want to listen to us, you can catch us on all major podcasting platforms. We're out there as well if you missed the live show on YouTube. So once again, folks, thanks as always. I appreciate you. We'll be back next week with more Big O Show on a Wednesday night. That is 8 Eastern, 7 Central. And I'm sure me and the boys will be on quite a bit throughout the rest of the week and then in the next week talking about mandatory minicamp. So once again, folks, thanks as always. Much love and go Bills.
Feel the same.